It's still lunchtime. Lunch Winfield announces that he's coming back for 2026. We'll talk about why it's so important right here on Ragin Rundown. What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into another episode here on Ragin Rundown. I'm your guy, Jamarcus Fitzpatrick, but you know you can always call me Fitz. And if this is your first time reaching the channel, please hit the bell down below and subscribe, like this video, and all of those good things so you know whenever we're dropping an episode. If this is your first time listening, be sure to follow the podcast feed wherever you get your favorite podcast so you know when we're dropping an episode. And in today's episode, we're talking about Lunch Winfield, the quarterback that seemingly took over in the middle of the season for Louisiana, has announced that he would be returning for the 2026 season. And this is humongous for the program on so many accounts. So we've got a jam-packed show. We're going to talk about that. The Cajuns have received their first commit in the transfer portal cycle, and also they have another couple of players that have hit the portal as well. So for those of you that may have been living under a rock or don't know about who or what Lunch has meant to this program, originally the Cajuns recruited him from Lutcher High School. That was the first time that I got to witness him in person, was the state championship game that he played in back in the, I believe it was the 2022 season, because his freshman year was 2023. So yes, the 2022 season was when he absolutely played out of his mind. In the state championship game, Lutcher wins it. He threw for 299 yards, 3 touchdowns. He rushed for 43 times, 130 yards, and a touchdown. So that is almost 500 yards of total offense and 4 touchdowns to lead his team to the state championship. And then that's his total senior year. He was named as the Louisiana Sports Writers Association Offensive Player of the Year, Best Player of the Year for the Greater New Orleans Quarterback Club. He accounted for 4,600 yards and 70 touchdowns in his senior campaign in high school. So he comes to UL and he kind of works his way through the depth chart, but he doesn't play. He just had one appearance in the season finale against ULM, rushing for 19 yards on 5 attempts. So you could kind of see that UL was already kind of working him in as more of a run-based type of quarterback. And then he redshirted the next season, and then this year was when everything kind of unfolded. Walker Howard wins the job out of camp, and then he gets hurt after the Rice game, and then Daniel Beal gets the chance to play. He plays against McNeese, Missouri, and then I believe that it was after that Eastern Michigan, and then they opened conference play against Marshall. And originally UL went down in the first half of that game. I think it was 31-17, if I'm not mistaken. And Lunch goes into the game. And, you know, at that point, you're on your third string quarterback. You're already, I think, 1-3 at that point of the season because you had a loss to Eastern Michigan, to Missouri, and to Rice. So you were 1-3 at that point in the season. It's like, oh boy, you're already down to your third quarterback. What is this really going to turn into? Lunch comes in, plays out of his mind, leads the Cajuns to a double overtime victory, and they win the ball game. And then after that, obviously the Cajuns would fall to 2-6 at one point in the season, and then they rattle off 4 straight victories to reach the 68 Ventures Bowl and play in the postseason. So Lunch totals in 2025, 1,500 yards passing, 1,500 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, 7 picks. And then he has 152 carries, 667 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He was, I believe, your second leading rusher, Billings Island, obviously being that 1-2 punch out of the backfield. So the true definition of a dual threat quarterback. And I know a lot of people were wondering, like, how does a guy like this just sit on the bench for so long? Was it misevaluation? Did they not just know what it was? And, you know, I remember going back into fall camp, head coach Michael Desimo pointed to how Lunch was developing in practice and how they were working with him in terms of trying to figure out whether it was reading through defenses or just becoming better at reading things as a passer. Because he can throw the football because you saw what he did in high school. And there were a couple of times that, during camp, we would, as we're coming in to get the period that we can film, which is just individual, when they're, routes on air and throwing to receivers and pass concepts. But, we're walking up and they have a team drill. And I distinctly remember Lunch pulled it on his own read one time and he kind of juked out a defender and the guy touched the ground. And I said, man, they got to find a way to get that guy on the field. Um, Obviously, you never want to see players get hurt. But obviously, because Walker got hurt in the first game of the season and things didn't pan out for Daniel, Lunch gets his opportunity. And it became fully obvious that having him as your starting quarterback creates a different dynamic to your offense. There were so many times that you would see a QB sweep or QB blast, all of these different run concepts, or even if it was a passing play and he looked downfield and his first target isn't open, his second isn't open, he could pull it and run. Multiple times we saw him do that in the Marshall game and then throughout the season. On top of that, Lunch is a extremely tough quarterback. There were multiple times throughout the season that he was battling injury. We even saw in the 68 Ventures Bowl, he got rolled up pretty good and he was hobbled for the rest of the game. So he's tough. He knows how to battle through. And so you have a leader that is vocal. He's always been a guy that's been a great vocal leader. You have someone that can be a dynamic runner of the football and also a thrower of the football. And then ultimately he is someone that's tough. And when you see that the guy, your guy, is the toughest player on the field or one of the tougher players on the field, it makes it a lot easier for other guys to rally in behind him. And so getting him back is a tremendous, tremendous boost for this program. I went back and I, kind of nerded out a little bit and I put together a roster layout of what things kind of looks like for UL. And obviously you have Lunch there at the top. You've got, Walker and Daniel Beal and Sam Altman and Coleman Carter in your quarterback room. So he's going to be throwing to Sheldon Sampson as his primary guy. They really kind of connected really well on the back half of the season after Sheldon got over some of those hand injuries that he was dealing with. You still have Caden Jensen that you're coming back into your offense as well. You have Cooper Fordham and, Caden Morrow and Matthew Broussard. George Jackson is going to be coming back after a medical red shirt. We'll talk about it more later in the episode, but Charles Robertson will not be back next season because he entered his name into the transfer portal. But you have a good bulk of what you had offensively last season coming back. And that now being, all culminated with your starting quarterback being back in the mix, your projected starting quarterback, they're going to go into camp and they're going to compete. But ultimately, this is Lunch's job to lose, barring any unforeseen circumstances that would happen. This is his job to lose. So a huge boost for the Cajuns in this mix. Honestly, I had kind of heard through rumblings of other conversations that, this was pretty much a lock for, quite some time, early on in the transfer portal cycle or, once the season was over, Bill and Zylan, left. And, that's a tough situation when, you're coming back as the starting quarterback and 60% of your ground game is gone now. But Lunch believes that things are going to work well for this program, for this team, and that he can be able to right the ship and get these guys back in the direction that they want to be. So, like I said, we have more things to talk about. The transfer portal is officially open, like we talked about in a previous episode, and the Cajuns have their first commitment, and it's from somewhere that's pretty close to the city of Lafayette. So we'll talk a little bit more about that after we take this break here on Ragin Rundown. So like I just mentioned, Louisiana has gotten their first commitment in the transfer portal cycle. I have a blog posted on KTC.com where I do the primary focus of my job, my day job on TV. and you can see the entire portal tracker of who UL is targeting, all the players that have left the program for UL, and also some local guys as well. If you're a 337 watcher and want to see what some of those guys are hitting. But UL has received their first commitment, obviously. We talked about in a previous episode, which you can go back and watch that one too, that they're, looking for outside linebacker and offensive tackle where their primary focus is. And then from there, it was as needed. Those needs have kind of, came about even more after Charles Robertson entered the transfer portal. And then on Sunday, Fitzgerald West also announced that he would be entering the transfer portal, a former Lafayette Christian star and defensive tackle. Now, UL, the early targets that I was able to kind of scrummage through and find out about were defensive players. Dunquarius, excuse me, let me go back and look down at his name because I've been, looking at so many different guys' names throughout the day. Dunquarius Parker from NC Central, and then Joseph Olawayemi, and then Niadi, both coming from Harding University. But the guy that they and then also Tyler Brumfield and sorry guys, I'm blanking right now. I've been looking at a lot of names. Mario Nash from Florida State, and then also Tyler Brumfield from Oklahoma State. But the first commitment that they receive is a Tulane offensive tackle. His name is Jace Mitchell, someone that the Cajuns had recruited back in 2023 when he was originally coming out of high school. Had tipped to Kevin Foote for putting it out there first, a veteran in the game and in this market as well. I'm winding down there at work and I see that he posted. So now I'm trying to go through everything. I reach out to Jace to confirm it, talk a little bit with him. And it is their first verbal commitment that they are receiving from the Tulane offensive lineman. Now, Mitchell spent 2 seasons with the Green Wave. He was rated a 3-star prospect by 24/7 Sports when he came out of high school. And he played both tackle and guard in high school. He was from Destrehan with the Wildcats, and he earned first-team All-State honors. So he is a talented kid. He's come from a winning program. He knows, again, like what I talked about in the previous episode, he knows what it takes to win. He's been around winning programs. He was just on this Tulane roster that made it to the college football playoff. And even though he wasn't heavily involved in the mix of playing, he was around it. So now you bring that into your program. It's a huge boost. 6'3", 310 pounds, and he has 3 years of eligibility remaining. So you're going to have this guy here for some time. Obviously, with the loss of Bryant Williams to the portal, the expectation would probably for him to be your left tackle. George Jackson could swing over and be your left tackle with being the more experienced tackle, but more than likely he will have an opportunity to go in and compete for one of those starting tackle roles. And like I mentioned earlier, Caden Morrow comes back at a guard position. Cooper Fordham comes back at center. Matt Broussard and Jacoby Isom both got reps at the guard position. So you're pretty much bringing back a very, very experienced group back. And now you're complementing that with a player that's been around a winning program and that's come from a winning pedigree. That's going to help you a ton now as you try to build towards getting back into those winning ways and trying to turn these things around. And, what better way than on the same day that you get your first commitment, your starting quarterback says he's coming back too. So that's a match made in heaven. And I would have to imagine that those two things worked hand in hand together. After I talked with Jace, he told me that, it was about the familiarity with the coaching staff, the scheme that they run, and the opportunity that he's going to have to be able to potentially play. So obviously, the scheme that UL runs, they are a run-heavy offense. And offensive linemen, personally, from playing the game myself as an offensive lineman, we like to run block. So an offensive tackle getting in and being able to see that he can come in and open lanes for a quarterback that is a dual threat, and then potentially for more running backs like a Stephen Blanco and a J.J. Gardner and a Darrell Smith and a Keyrion Smith. When he looks at that gets him pretty excited. So Mitchell will take his official visit on January the 9th and the 10th as well. So he is already verbally committed, and then the paperwork and all of those things will be able to be taken care of from there. So Like I mentioned, there also were 2 other players that entered the transfer portal from the Ragin Cajuns, now bringing the total to 9 total guys that are now in the transfer portal. Bill Davis was your first player to actually commit. And as of me recording this episode here on Monday night, January the 5th, Zylan Perry is currently on a visit with Tennessee. He's a Franklin native, so I'm going to continue to talk about that. I know some people probably feel like, why am I still talking about it? Some of these players are going to continue to be players of interest because of either the location that they are or the fact that they might be a Louisiana native. So it is what it is. That's a part of the job. However, the Cajuns are now up to 9 players that are in the portal. Fitzgerald West announced on Sunday he'll have 1 year of eligibility remaining. He will be a grad transfer, as he did graduate recently. He had 48 tackles and 3 sacks in his 2 years at UL. A former LSU player himself, transferred in from LSU, came in and got the opportunity to play on the defensive line. And, you know, for him, I believe that this is not necessarily about playing time or anything like that, but it's just being able to see what else is really out there from a program standpoint. You know, obviously, UL hasn't had its best years the past couple of years, and you know, maybe just being able to see what things are, you know, from a nutritional standpoint, from you know, a money standpoint, all of those different things like that. Those could potentially be reasons of why he may have entered. I'm not exactly sure. I'm just speculating, but he does enter the portal. You're losing a local guy, a former Lafayette Christian star, who has 1 year of eligibility remaining. And then right before I got ready to come home to then come and record this episode talking about Lunch and Jace, Charles Robertson announces that he would be entering the portal, a wide receiver for you, announcing redshirt junior, 15 receptions, 250 yards, and a touchdown this season, and he'll have 1 year of eligibility remaining as well. So you're losing 2 guys that were in your starting roles in your depth chart. But the way UL kind of utilizes their offense in those positions and then defense on the defensive line is that they rotate extremely heavily. You know, at that kind of Z position, Charles was your first guy, and then after that, you kind of had like a Raji Dennis, and then you know, Landon Strother also plays kind of rotating between the H inside receiver and then also that Z receiver as well. So you have other guys in the room. You also have Christian Brooks that you signed out of high school. So you have players that you have along the way. So you do, but you do lose 2 players. And then it also makes even more sense of why UL is targeting the 2 Harding defensive tackles with Fitzgerald West entering the portal as well. So you lose some depth pieces, but you're going to try to add that back through the portal and also through the high school ranks as well. So like I said, guys, we had a jam-packed episode here. Lunch Winfield is coming back for UL. Jason Mitchell has committed to the Ragin Cajuns, and Fitzgerald West and Charles Robertson are entering the transfer portal. So that's going to wrap things up here on this edition of Ragin Rundown. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much. Please do me a favor, hit the like button, leave a comment. I love to interact with you guys, and then share it with somebody else. If you're listening to this podcast, please leave a review, and then also follow the podcast feed wherever you get your favorite podcast so you know when we're dropping episodes here on Ragin Rundown. I'm your guy, Jamarcus Fitzpatrick. We'll see you guys next time.